Sirius Black. One of the most devastating moments of the series is when Bellatrix casts the killing curse towards Sirius. But what if Harry blocks it just in time to save Sirius? Sirius stumbles back from the veil, alive, and Harry doesn't have to spend the next 2 years carrying that guilt. Sounds perfect, right? Yeah, about that. Because Sirius being alive means Harry finally has a home, a real one. Sirius starts showing up at Hogwarts to check on Harry, sending howlers to Snape during potions class, and generally treating parenting the same way he treated school rules, with creative disregard. After losing James and Azkaban stealing 12 years from him, Sirius refuses to watch another Potter walk into a dangerous mission with a plan that sounds like it was made up on the back of a napkin, which honestly it kinda was. So when Dumbledore finally tells Harry he has to leave Hogwarts and hunt Horcruxes across the country, Sirius says absolutely not. He locks down Grimmauld Place, calls in every favor the Black name still has left, and refuses to let Harry walk into a death mission with 2 teenagers and a tent, which is touching, heroic, and a complete disaster, because every week Sirius protects Harry, Voldemort gets stronger. The Horcrux hunt starts late. The Ministry falls anyway. Lupin dies before Harry ever reaches him. Tonks dies looking for Remus. And by the time Harry finally escapes Sirius's protection, the war has already moved past the point where bravery is enough. So Sirius spent his whole life trying to protect James Potter's son. And somehow, in the end, that becomes the one thing Voldemort needed him to do. Severus Snape, the greatest potions master alive, spent years sitting 2 feet from a giant venomous snake, and somehow didn't have an antidote in his pocket. Please. Snape crawls out of the shrieking shack covered in blood, furious about the state of his robes, and alive. The most dramatic man in wizarding history survives in the most on-brand way possible, by being over-prepared. Harry still gets the memories from the pensive, the truth still comes out, and suddenly the entire wizarding world has to sit with the fact that the guy they hated for 7 years was on their side the whole time. Awkward. Especially for Harry, who now has to get back to Snape and say something along the lines of, "Thank you," which might be the most uncomfortable conversation either of them has ever had, and that's saying a lot. But here's where it gets interesting. Narcissa Malfoy is also walking out of this war with a secret. She lied to Voldemort's face to save Draco. Lucius is headed to Azkaban, and she's suddenly a single mother with a ruined reputation and a manor full of bad memories. 2 Slytherins who spent their entire lives wearing masks, suddenly standing in the open with nowhere to hide. One day Snape just starts showing up at the manor to check on Draco, because that's what he promised Dumbledore, and he keeps finding reasons to stay for tea. Narcissa never asks why, she already knows. The most Slytherin love story imaginable, quiet, calculated, and completely free of anything as undignified as a love confession. Dobby. Remember how Bellatrix threw that knife? In this version, the aim's a little off. Dobby lands on that beach alive, shaking and probably still holding something he stole on the way out. But Ron Weasley doesn't. The knife catches him in the chest, and by the time they reach Shell Cottage, there's nothing Bill or Fleur can do. The trio becomes a duo. Harry and Hermione finish the Horcrux hunt together, and somewhere between Godric's Hollow and the Forest of Dean, they fall in love. Because after losing Ron, there's nobody in the whole world who feels closer than the person carrying the same grief. Dobby stays with them through all of it, fights his way through the Battle of Hogwarts alongside Kreacher and the Kitchen Elves, and somewhere in the middle of it becomes the most famous house elf in Britain. When the war ends, Harry and Hermione marry quietly. The Burrow welcomes Hermione, mourns Ron, and somehow makes both work. Sunday dinners are tender and impossible at the same time, and Dobby walks into the Ministry with Hermione. SPEW stops being a joke. House elves get wages, contracts, the right to refuse work, and a free elf in mismatched socks standing next to the most overqualified witch of her generation tells the Wizengamot exactly how it's going to be. Not bad for an elf who spent his first 10 years of freedom collecting socks. Cedric Diggory. Let's go back to the Triwizard Maze. Cedric and Harry reach the cup at the same time, and in this version, Cedric steps back. "Go ahead, Potter." Harry grabs the cup alone. The portkey drops him straight into the Little Hangleton graveyard. start. He watches Voldemort come back and stumbles back to Hogwarts with a story nobody can corroborate. Cedric is still standing in the maze when the news breaks. The Daily Prophet, the Ministry, half the school, they all turn on Harry. And Cedric watches the boy who stole his Triwizard moment become the boy crying wolf about the Dark Lord. The jealousy that started small, just a flicker about losing the cup, gets fed every day for a year. Cedric starts speaking out against Harry, quietly at first, then publicly. Then on the front page of the Prophet, the Death Eaters are watching, and a respected champion calling Harry Potter a liar is a recruitment gold. By the time Harry realizes what's happening, Cedric is already wearing the mark under his sleeve. In The Cursed Child, depending on your canon tolerance, of course, Cedric becomes a Death Eater after a humiliation in the Triwizard. This timeline finally makes that reveal land, and Harry spends his 6th year fighting a war on 2 fronts, including one where the enemy is wearing his old yellow scarf. But that's a completely different story. Mad-Eye Moody. Alright, let's go back to the Battle of the 7 Potters. Mundungus Fletcher panics, disapparates, and leaves Moody alone in the sky against Voldemort. In this version, Moody takes the hit, loses his other leg, and still somehow crashes into a field alive. Because killing Mad-Eye Moody apparently requires more than the most powerful dark wizard in history. Constant vigilance is not a joke. He recovers just in time to hear that 3 teenagers are planning to hunt Horcruxes with 0 training, 0 backup, and a tent. Moody shuts that down immediately. Within 2 weeks, the trio is safer, faster, and completely miserable. Remember how Ron left in Deathly Hallows and came back? With Moody around, Ron leaves and doesn't come back, because Moody won't let him. Deserted once, compromised forever. Hermione takes Moody's side, protocol over feelings, and Ron never forgives her for it. The locket amplifies everything. Moody's paranoia becomes psychotic, Hermione becomes cold, and the boy who was already insecure about his place in the group loses it entirely. They destroy the Horcruxes faster, win the war sooner, and Ron and Hermione never speak to each other again. Efficient, brutal, and absolutely no wedding at the end. James Potter. The killing curse hits Lily, the sacrifice protects Harry, and Voldemort's own spell destroys him. All of that stays the same. The only difference is that James Potter is still alive in the next room when it happens, which means he's the one who picks up Harry, gets to Dumbledore that same night and tells him the one thing that rewrites everything. Peter Pettigrew was the secret keeper. That single conversation saves Sirius from 12 years in Azkaban, catches Pettigrew before he can disappear as a rat, and here's the part nobody sees coming, saves the Longbottoms. Because remember what happened in the original timeline? After Voldemort vanished, Bellatrix and the Lestranges went looking for their master, couldn't find him, and tortured Frank and Alice Longbottom into permanent insanity trying to get answers. With James alive and openly naming names, the Lestranges go after the Potters instead, and the Longbottoms become an afterthought. Frank and Alice stay healthy, stay sharp, and stay parents, which means Neville Longbottom grows up as the son of 2 decorated Aurors, instead of a boy who visits his mother at St. Mungo's. This Neville shows up at Hogwarts with a wand that actually chose him, confidence his grandmother never had to force him into, and absolutely 0 fear of Snape. Because when your parents have faced actual Death Eaters, a man in a cape being dramatic with an abnormally large nose doesn't really register. By 7th year, Hogwarts doesn't need Harry Potter anymore. It already has Neville Longbottom running the resistance from the Room of Requirement. And honestly, he might just be better at the job. When Harry finally shows up for the final battle, the school barely looks up. They've already found their hero, Fred Weasley. So, let's imagine that right before the wall collapses, George yells something from across the corridor. Probably a joke. Probably something deeply inappropriate for a battlefield. And Fred turns his head just long enough to dodge the blast. He's alive, he's dusty, and he's already making fun of Percy before anyone's finished crying. So, what happens next? Well, here's where it gets interesting, because Fred is still on his feet. He ends up in a different corridor 2 minutes later, rounds a corner and sees Fenrir Greyback on top of Lavender Brown. In the original timeline, Hermione blasted Greyback off her, but whether Lavender survived was left horribly unclear. In this one, Fred gets there first, hits Greyback with something that probably wasn't in any approved spellbook, and Lavender survives. Now the twins reopen the shop, expand to Hogsmeade, and business is booming. 40 howlers per week from parents whose children have mysteriously turned orange. Ministry inspectors leaving with nosebleed nougat in their pockets and no memory of why they came. Classic Weasley operation. But the real twist? Fred starts dating Lavender Lavender. Yes, that Lavender, Ron's ex-girlfriend, the Wan Lavender. And if you think Ron ever let that go, you haven't met Ron. Sunday dinners at the Burrow became the most passive-aggressive event in Wizarding Britain, and Molly is absolutely living for it. Lily Potter. So, let's say Voldemort kills James, walks upstairs, and actually keeps his promise to Snape. He offers Lily the exit. She takes it. Sirius shows up seconds later, buys enough time for Lily and Harry to get out, and dies doing it. Because apparently protecting Potters is a full-time job with 0 survivors. Voldemort gets caught, tried, and thrown into Azkaban in the most satisfying court case the wizarding world has ever seen. Then Snape shows up. Snape offers help, awkwardly, and Lily accepts because she has nowhere else to stand. Grief pulls them close, and within a year they marry. Lily insists Harry keeps the Potter name, and Snape agrees without arguing, which might be the most romantic thing he's ever done. A year later they have a daughter, Iris Snape, half-blood princess of the most unlikely family in Wizarding Britain. Hogwarts is interesting. Snape is still the scariest teacher in the building. Harry still ends up in Gryffindor, and family dinners during Christmas break are exactly as uncomfortable as you'd imagine. Then Voldemort breaks out, because of course he does. The Horcrux hunt, the final battle, Dumbledore finishing what the prophecy never started, all of it happens faster and uglier than anyone planned. Voldemort dies for real this time, the wizarding world exhales, and Lily quietly leaves Snape within the year. Too many ghosts, and a marriage that was built on grief instead of a foundation. Lily and Harry visit James's grave together, and she tells him everything. Fleamont and Euphemia Potter. In case you didn't know, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter are Harry's grandparents. James's parents, who died of dragonpox shortly before Harry was born. So in this scenario, them being alive means Harry grows up with actual family, actual magic, and the kind of childhood that involves bedrooms and Christmas presents. When Lily and James die, baby Harry skips the Dursleys entirely and goes straight to the Potter estate, to grandparents who adore him. Fleamont doesn't believe for a second that Sirius betrayed his son. Sirius lived with the Potters after running away from the Blacks. He was practically family. Fleamont uses money, lawyers, and Wizengamot pressure until Sirius gets a trial. Pettigrew's name comes up. The rat gets hunted down years before Ron ever finds him in his bed, and the entire third book just disappears. Harry shows up at Hogwarts confident, loved, and already knowing what a Quidditch World Cup looks like. Ron is still his best friend. Hermione is still the smartest person in the room. But Harry doesn't need either of them the way he did in the original story. He already has family waiting at home. So when Luna Lovegood shows up wearing her radish earrings and talking about creatures nobody else can see, Harry actually listens, because he knows what it's like to see things other people can't. Within a year, they're in love, and it might be the most romantic thing in the entire series. When the war comes, Harry fights like someone with everything to lose. He has Luna, he has his grandparents, and he ends it fast, because this time, he actually has a life worth getting back to. Bellatrix Lestrange. So, Molly's curse misses, and in this new timeline, Bellatrix Lestrange survives the one moment canon never allowed her to see, her noseless master dying in front of her. So by the time the war ends, Bellatrix is sent to the rebuilt Azkaban, without Dementors, with a secret she's been carrying for 9 months. 6 weeks into her sentence, Delphine Riddle is born in the cell. Half black, half dark lord, and probably the most uncomfortable birth certificate ever filed at the ministry. Kingsley Shacklebolt, the new minister, and the only person in the room not terrified of paperwork, makes a decision nobody else is willing to make. He takes the child quietly, off the record, and brings her to Harry Potter. Harry says yes because he understands the danger better than anyone. A child raised as a threat can grow into one. It's the most insane piece of policy in wizarding history, and it absolutely works. Harry raises her under the Potter name first as the child nobody is allowed to know about, and later when his own children are born as the older sister no history book ever mentions. Bellatrix dies in Azkaban a few years later, never having met her daughter again. And somewhere in the forest of Dean, the boy who lived is teaching the Dark Lord's daughter how to fly a broom. How touching. Hedwig. The killing curse clips her wing during the 7 Potters' escape, and she spirals down into the darkness somewhere over Surrey. Harry sees her fall and thinks that's it. He grieves her quietly, the way he grieves everything between catastrophes. But Hedwig is alive. A Muggle family finds an injured Snowy Owl, and they're garden the next morning and takes her to a wildlife center, because muggles are like that. She heals in a few weeks, flies out of an open window, and does what any owl would do, goes looking for her wizard. The problem is Harry is on the Horcrux hunt under every protection charm Hermione could think of, and even the most loyal owl in Britain can't track someone who doesn't want to be found. So Hedwig flies to the only place that ever felt like home, Hogwarts. She spends the winter in the Owlery, waiting, and somewhere in the Scottish Highlands nearby, a wild phoenix is doing exactly the same thing. When the battle begins and magic explodes over the castle like a signal flare, Fawkes feels it, and Hedwig, who has been waiting for months with the patience of an owl who has watched Harry Potter do homework, leads him straight to the one person they both came back for. Phoenix tears hit the battlefield, and wounds that should have been fatal start closing. Fred opens his eyes under the rubble. Remus keeps breathing. Tonks gets back on her feet. Lavender Brown survives Greyback's attack with scars she'll carry forever, but she carries them alive. All because a postal owl loved her boy enough to wait. Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. Imagine this. Remus and Tonks walk out of the Battle of Hogwarts alive, go home to baby Teddy, and for about 3 weeks everything is perfect. Domestic bliss. Werewolf edition. Then Kingsley Shacklebolt calls. The new ministry wants to reform werewolf legislation, and they need a face for the campaign. A respectable war hero family man werewolf who proves that lycanthropy doesn't make someone a monster. Guess who fits the description perfectly and hates every second of it? Remus Lupin spent his entire life making sure nobody noticed him, and now his face is on the ministry pamphlets. Tonks thinks it's hilarious. Tonks also thinks he should do it, because if the guy who fought Voldemort can't change how people see werewolves, then who can? Remus knows she's right, which makes it significantly worse. And then Greyback resurfaces. He spent his whole life preaching that werewolves should be feared, that they're predators, that they should build an army and take over. And now his most famous victim is standing on ministry posters telling everyone that werewolves are perfectly safe members of society. So he starts attacking again, deliberately, publicly, making sure every new bite lands right when Remus is making progress. Remus wanted a quiet life with Teddy and Tonks. Instead, he got a second war against the man who made him what he is, fighting over what it means to be it. Regulus Black. Regulus Black was Sirius's younger brother. He died trying to destroy Voldemort's Locket Horcrux in a cave full of inferi, pulled under the lake before he could finish the job. So this time, Creature grabs his hand. That's the only difference. One house elf pulling a little harder, dragging his master out of that lake before the inferi close in. Regulus crawls out of the cave with a Horcrux in his pocket and a decision to make. Disappear or walk into the Order of the Phoenix and tell them everything. He walks into Dumbledore's office with a locket and a word that changes the entire war. Horcrux. Dumbledore now knows what Voldemort's been making, decades before he was supposed to. He starts hunting them himself, quietly, carefully. When the gaunt ring surfaces, he destroys it from a safe distance, walks away with both hands intact, and the astronomy tower scene never happens. Dumbledore lives. Snape never has to play assassin. By the time Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest, Dumbledore has already told him everything. The scar, the 7th Horcrux, why he has to let Voldemort kill him. Harry goes, dies, comes back, and his old headmaster is still there on the other side. All because one boy walked out of a cave and decided to talk. Dumbledore. So, let's go back to the astronomy tower. Death Eaters below. Draco frozen with his wand on Dumbledore, and Snape walking through the door with the killing curse already in his lips. In this version, Snape lowers his wand, says no, and Dumbledore stays alive, barely. The tower erupts into chaos. The Death Eaters escape into the night. Draco disappears with them, and Snape is left standing in the wreckage of the plan he was supposed to finish. For one terrible moment, he waits for Dumbledore's judgment. Instead, Dumbledore forgives him, calm, devastating, and already thinking 3 moves ahead. The old plan is gone, so they build a new one. The curse is counting down his last months, and dying turns out to be the thing that finally makes Dumbledore brave enough to face the person he's been avoiding for half a century. He walks into Nurmengard, sits across from Gellert Grindelwald, and they have the conversation. Who really killed Dumbledore's sister Ariana? Whatever wars between them, that was never quite just friendship, and everything they should have said 50 years ago. Meanwhile, Voldemort is hunting the Elder Wand and traces it to Dumbledore. The 1945 duel is hardly a secret, but even dying, Dumbledore is the one wizard Voldemort won't face head-on. and by the time the curse finishes the job, the wand is already with Harry. Harry already had the cloak and the stone. Now he walks into the final battle as the Master of Death, with the most powerful wand in existence, against a Dark Lord carrying a borrowed one. Fewer people die at Hogwarts that night. The war ends cleaner, and somewhere in Nurmengard, Grindelwald is still breathing. Now that we've brought everyone back, let's see who showed up next. All 21 new wizards and witches you missed after the Deathly Hallows explained. That's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before Dobby organizes a union vote.